The skies above Velroy Prime burned like the end of the world. Towering pillars of orange fire rose from shattered cities, staining the clouds with smoke and ash. Every few seconds, another explosion shook the ground, sending shockwaves through the ancient council hall. Elder Salmoth stood motionless before the great crystal window. He watched his civilization die. Far above the atmosphere, the massive Kranath warships hung in orbit like black predators waiting for helpless prey. Their weapons fired relentlessly, streams of crimson energy crashing into cities that had stood peacefully for centuries. Each blast erased another piece of his home, another family, another memory. His 4 hands trembled. Not from fear, from helplessness. Behind him, the council chamber had descended into chaos. Officials shouted into communication devices. Medical teams rushed wounded civilians through the halls. Children cried as frightened parents searched desperately for missing loved ones. An exhausted assistant stumbled toward him. Her voice cracked with desperation. "Elder!" She struggled to hold back tears. "We have to evacuate the children." She glanced at the burning skyline. "The underground shelters won't survive much longer." Salmoth closed his eyes for a moment, then slowly turned away from the window. The orange glow of the fires reflected across his emerald compound eyes. "Evacuate them? Where?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "The Kranath control every orbit around our world." A tactical display flickered to life. Dozens of enemy warships completely surrounded the planet. Every escape route blocked. Any civilian transport that leaves the atmosphere, he swallowed, will be destroyed before it reaches open space. Silence answered him, because everyone knew he was right. Only 3 days earlier, Velroy Prime had been one of the most prosperous trading worlds in the sector. Its crystal markets welcomed merchants from hundreds of civilizations. Its people built masterpieces instead of weapons. They traded silk woven from moon spiders, rare minerals harvested from living asteroids, works of art treasured across the galaxy. The Velroy had never believed they needed an army. Why would peaceful traders need soldiers? They had no enemies. Or so they believed. Then the Kranath arrived. Without warning, without negotiation, without mercy. There had been no declaration of war, no demands, no threats, only orbital bombardment. Within hours, the Velroy defense fleet ceased to exist. Their cities were defenseless. Their future erased. Now enemy landing craft descended through the smoke-filled sky like swarms of insects. Armored Kranath soldiers marched through broken streets. Anyone who resisted was executed. Those who survived were chained together. Families were ripped apart. Parents torn away from children. Entire crowds were forced into enormous metal transport cages. Salmoth had heard stories from worlds that had suffered the same fate. The Kranath did not conquer civilizations. They harvested them. Every survivor became property. Slaves. Workers condemned to spend the rest of their lives inside mines, factories, and labor camps, until exhaustion finally claimed them. No one ever returned. An explosion shattered the silence. The western wall of the council chamber collapsed inward. Dust and burning debris filled the room. Several guards rushed to shield the civilians. The building itself was beginning to fail. Salmoth stared through the smoke. His ancient voice trembled. There has to be someone. Someone strong enough to stop them. Someone brave enough to answer. His assistant slowly lowered her head. No one is coming. The Galactic Council says their nearest fleet is weeks away. The neighboring systems have already surrendered. We're alone. The words struck harder than the bombardment outside. Alone. An entire civilization. Forgotten. Abandoned. Then, every communication terminal inside the chamber suddenly came alive. A new transmission forced its way through the Kranath jamming network. The room fell silent. An unfamiliar voice echoed across every speaker. Calm, confident, unshaken. This is Fleet Admiral Jun-Ho of the United Earth Defense Fleet. The Kranath officers aboard their orbiting ships immediately began transmitting warnings. You are entering restricted military space. Turn back immediately, or you will be destroyed. The human voice answered without hesitation. Negative. A brief pause. Then one final sentence. The people of Velroy Prime are under humanity's protection now. For the first time in 3 days, hope returned to the eyes of a dying world. He walked through the ancient halls of the council building. His claws clicked on the stone floor. These halls were 3,000 years old. His ancestors had built them. Now they would become ruins. He stopped at a sealed door. Behind it lay the chamber of old things where the Velroy kept artifacts from the first ones. Those legendary beings had visited Velroy Prime long ago before Zelmoth's grandfather was born. They had been kind. They had given gifts. They had spoken of an alliance of free peoples across the stars. Then they vanished. Most people thought they were just stories now. But Zelmoth's family had guarded the chamber for generations. He pressed his hand against the lock. The door opened with a hiss of old air. Inside, covered in dust, out a small metal device. It looked like a silver egg with strange symbols carved into its surface. The first ones had called it a beacon. They said if the Velroy ever needed help, they should activate it. Help would come. Zelmoth picked up the beacon. It was heavier than it looked. They've been gone for 1,000 years, he said to himself. This is foolish. But what choice did he have? His people were dying. He pressed the symbols in the pattern his grandfather had taught him. The beacon hummed. Lights flickered across its surface. Then it went silent. Nothing happened. Zelmoth felt his hope die. Of course, nothing happened. The first ones were gone. No one was coming. He set the beacon down and walked back to the window. Below, he could see Kranith soldiers forcing his people into lines. Children cried for their parents. The elderly fell and were dragged to their feet. I'm sorry, Zelmoth whispered to his world. I tried. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space novel Velroy had ever visited, a human ship drifted between the stars. The vessel was called the Indomitable Spirit. It was a science ship built for exploration, not war. Its hull was white and blue, marked with the symbol of Earth's United Terran Council. Captain Dewan Kim sat in his command chair, reading reports. His crew had been mapping this sector for 3 months. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. Captain, said Boranam, his communications officer, I'm picking up something strange. Dewan looked up. What kind of strange? A signal? Very old frequency. It's broken up. But Bora frowned at her console. Sir, I think it's a distress call. Dewan stood and walked to her station. From who? There shouldn't be anyone out here. That's just it. The signal bounced through some kind of relay station. It's ancient technology. I can barely understand it. But there are universal distress markers in the code. Bora played the audio. It was mostly static, but underneath, there were sounds, explosions, screaming, a voice speaking in a language the computer couldn't translate. But fear needed no translation. Can you trace where it's coming from? Dewan asked. Bora worked her console. Yes, but Captain, it's 3 weeks away at maximum speed, and it's not in any of our charts. This is completely unexplored space. Day 1 listened to the distress call again. More screaming, the sound of children crying, then silence. His first officer, a man named Taeyang, stepped forward. Sir, this isn't our problem. We're not a warship. If something dangerous is happening out there, people are dying, Daewon said quietly. People we don't know in space, we're not authorized to enter. Taeyang crossed his arms. I'm not saying it's not sad. I'm saying it's not our mission. Dayan looked at the star map 3 weeks away. The Indomitable Spirit had only light weapons. If they went into danger, they might all die. The smart thing was to report this to command and let them decide. But in 3 weeks, whoever sent that signal would be dead. Bora, can you clean up that signal at all? I want to know what we're dealing with. Bora worked for several minutes. Finally, she played it again. This time, through the static, they could hear words. The computer tried to translate them. The words appeared on the screen. Help, please. They're killing us. Taking the children. Someone answer. The bridge went silent. Every crew member stared at the screen. Day 1 made his decision. Said course for the source of that signal. Maximum speed and captain. Taeyang started. I know, Day 1 said. I know we're not a warship. I know we might be flying into something we can't handle. But that signal is asking for help. Someone has to answer. What if no one else comes? Taeyang asked. What if it's just us against whatever is doing this? Dwan looked at his crew. They were scared. He was scared too, but he thought about those children in the signal. He thought about his own daughter back on Earth. What would he want someone to do if she needed help? Then it's just us, Daewon said. But at least we'll try. Bora, send an emergency broadcast on all human frequencies. Tell any ship in range what we found. Use the old code. All hands, all ships, civilians in danger. Sir, that code is for extreme emergencies only. I know what it's for. Send it. Bora nodded and sent the message. It would take time to reach other human ships. Maybe no one would answer. Maybe they'd think Daewon was crazy for responding to an alien distress call, but he had to try. The indomitable spirit turned and began accelerating. Its engines burned bright in the darkness. Behind it, the message spread through human space like ripples in water. Far away on Velrose Prime, Zalmuth sat among the ruins of his council chamber. He had accepted his fate. The beacon had failed. No one was coming. But in the cold mathematics of space, in the quantum foam between stars, something stirred. The beacon's message hadn't reached its intended target. The relay stations of the first ones were old and broken. The signal had bounced wrong, gone to the wrong place, called the wrong people. But it had been heard, and someone was coming. The sky above Prime burned with orange fire. Zalmuth stood at the window of the council chamber and watched his world die. His forearms trembled as another explosion lit up the horizon. The Kranath ships hung in orbit like dark clouds, raining death on everything below. Elder, we must evacuate the children, said his assistant, her voice breaking. The shelters won't hold much longer. Zalmuth turned away from the window. His insect-like eyes reflected the flames outside. Evacuate them where Theranith control the space around our world. Any ship that tries to leave will be destroyed. 3 days ago, his people had been happy. The Velroi were traders, not warriors. They sold fine silks and rare minerals to dozens of worlds. They had no enemies. Or so they thought. Then, the Kranath came. They didn't ask for surrender. They didn't demand tribute. They simply attacked. Within hours, the defense fleet was gone. Now the Kranath ground forces were landing, herding civilians into large metal cages. Zalmuth knew what came next. He had heard the stories from other worlds. The Kranath took slaves. They would work the Velroi to death in their mines and factories. There must be something, Zalmuth whispered. He walked through the ancient halls of the council building. His claws clicked on the stone floor. These halls were 3,000 years old. His ancestors had built them. Now they would become ruins. He stopped at a sealed door. Behind it lay the Chamber of Old Things, where the Velroi kept artifacts from the first ones. Those legendary beings had visited Velro Prime long ago, before Zalmuth's grandfather was born. They had been kind. They had given gifts. They had spoken of an alliance of free peoples across the stars. Then they vanished. Most people thought they were just stories now. But Zalmuth's family had guarded the chamber for generations. He pressed his hand against the lock. The door opened with a hiss of old air. Inside, covered in dust, out a small metal device. It looked like a silver egg with strange symbols carved into its surface. The first ones had called it a beacon. They said if the Velroi ever needed help, they should activate it. Help would come. Zalmuth picked up the beacon. It was heavier than it looked. They've been gone for 1,000 years, he said to himself. This is foolish, but what choice did he have? His people were dying. He pressed the symbols in the pattern his grandfather had taught him. The beacon hummed. Lights flickered across its surface. Then it went silent. Nothing happened. Zalmuth felt his hope die. Of course nothing happened. The first ones were gone. No one was coming. He set the beacon down and walked back to the window. Below, he could see Kranath soldiers forcing his people into lines. Children cried for their parents. The elderly fell and were dragged to their feet. I'm sorry, Zalmuth whispered to his world. I tried. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space novel had ever visited, a human ship drifted between the stars. The vessel was called the Indomitable Spirit. It was a science ship, built for exploration, not war. Its hull was white and blue, marked with the symbol of Earth's United Terran Council. Captain Daewon Kim sat in his command chair, reading reports. His crew had been mapping this sector for 3 months. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. Captain, said Boranam, his communications officer. I'm picking up something strange. Daewon looked up. What kind of strange? A signal? Very old frequency, It's broken up, but Bora frowned at her console. Sir, I think it's a distress call. Daewon stood and walked to her station. From who? There shouldn't be anyone out here. That's just it. The signal bounced through some kind of relay station. It's ancient technology. I can barely understand it, but there are universal distress markers in the code. Bora played the audio. It was mostly static, but underneath there were sounds, explosions, screaming, a voice speaking in a language the computer couldn't translate. But fear needed no translation. Can you trace where it's coming from? Daewon asked. Bora worked her console. Yes, but Captain, it's 3 weeks away at maximum speed, and it's not in any of our charts. This is completely unexplored space. Daewon listened to the distress call again. More screaming, the sound of children crying, then silence. His first officer, a man named Taeyong, stepped forward. Sir, this isn't our problem. We're not a warship. If something dangerous is happening out there, people are dying, Daewon said quietly. People we don't know in space were not authorized to enter. Taeyong crossed his arms. I'm not saying it's not sad. I'm saying it's not our mission. Daewon looked at the star map 3 weeks away. The indomitable spirit had only light weapons. If they went into danger, they might all die. The smart thing was to report this to command and let them decide. But in 3 weeks, whoever sent that signal would be dead. Bora, can you clean up that signal at all? I want to know what we're dealing with. Bora worked for several minutes. Finally, she played it again. This time, through the static, they could hear words. The computer tried to translate them. The words appeared on the screen. Help, please. They're killing us. Taking the children. Someone answer. The bridge went silent. Every crew member stared at the screen. Daewon made his decision. Set course for the source of that signal. Maximum speed and Captain. Taeyong started. I know. Daewon said. I know we're not a warship. I know we might be flying into something we can't handle. But that signal is asking for help. Someone has to answer. What if no one else comes? Taeyong asked. What if it's just us against whatever is doing this? Daewon looked at his crew. They were scared. He was scared too. But he thought about those children in the signal. He thought about his own daughter back on Earth. What would he want someone to do if she needed help? Then it's just us, Daewon said. But at least we'll try. Bora, send an emergency broadcast on all human frequencies. Tell any ship in range what we found. Use the old code. All hands, all ships, civilians in danger. Sir, that code is for extreme emergencies only. I know what it's for. Send it. Bora nodded and sent the message. It would take time to reach other human ships. Maybe no one would answer. Maybe they'd think Daewon was crazy for responding to an alien distress call, but he had to try. The indomitable spirit turned and began accelerating. Its engines burned bright in the darkness. Behind it, the message spread through human space like ripples in water. Far away on Velrose Prime, Zalmuth sat among the ruins of his council chamber. He had accepted his fate. The beacon had failed. No one was coming. But in the cold mathematics of space, in the quantum foam between stars, something stirred. The beacon's message hadn't reached its intended target. The relay stations of the first ones were old and broken. The signal had bounced wrong, gone to the wrong place, called the wrong people. But it had been heard, and someone was coming. Admiral Gia Park was having a bad day. Her fleet was supposed to be hunting pirates near the Terran border. Instead, she was staring at an emergency message that made no sense. Play it again, she told her communications officer. The message crackled through the speakers. Captain Daewon Kim's voice was clear but urgent. This is the indomitable spirit. We've received an alien distress call. Unknown species under attack. Possible genocide in progress. We're responding, but we need help. All hands, all ships, civilians in danger. The coordinates followed. They were weeks away from any human territory. He's lost his mind, said Commander Wu Jin-han, her second in command, responding to an alien signal. We don't even know these aliens exist. It could be a trap. Gia studied the star charts. Wu Jin was right. This was crazy. Her orders were clear. Stay at the border. Protect human shipping. Don't go chasing ghosts in unknown space. But that code, all hands, all ships. Her grandfather had used it once, 50 years ago during the colony wars. It meant innocent people were dying, and every ship that could help should help. It was the highest emergency code in the human fleet. How many ships do we have? Jia asked. 12 warships. The full battle group, Wu Jin replied. But Admiral, if we leave our position, pirates could attack the civilian shipping lanes. Jia closed her eyes. She thought about the rules, the regulations, the court-martial she would face for abandoning her post. Then she thought about what her grandfather had told her when she joined the Navy. The rules exist to protect people. When the rules stop you from protecting people, you break the rules. Set course for those coordinates, Jia said. All ships, maximum speed. Wu Jun stared at her. Admiral, I know, but if Captain Kim is right and people are dying, I can't just ignore it. We'll face the consequences later. Across human space, other ships received the message. Some ignored it. Some thought it was a mistake, but some answered. San Ho Choi was one of them. He was 60 years old and had been flying cargo ships for 40 years. His ship, the Steady Hand, was currently carrying medical supplies to a colony world. It was a boring job, safe, predictable. When he heard the distress call, something stirred in his chest. He'd been a soldier once during the Proxima Wars. He'd seen what happened when good people did nothing. He still had nightmares about it. Computer, calculate route to those coordinates, he said. Warning, the ship's computer replied. Destination is 3 weeks away. Current delivery will be late. I don't care. Plot the course. Warning, vessel is unarmed. Situation may be dangerous. Sangho smiled grimly. I know how to fix that. He'd hauled mining explosives before. He knew how to rig them into makeshift weapons. It wouldn't be much, but it was something. The Steady Hand changed course, and Sangho wasn't alone. Across the trade routes, other civilian captains heard the call. Some were veterans like him. Some were just people who couldn't ignore a cry for help. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even a luxury yacht owned by a rich man named Taeyong Yun, who thought adventure sounded better than his boring life. They all turned toward the coordinates. On the colony world of New Ju, a young engineer named Haya Lee was working late. She was 26 and brilliant. She designed half the defense systems protecting the planet. When she intercepted the military broadcast, she knew what she had to do. She marched into her supervisor's office. I need the authorization codes for the planetary defense drones. Her supervisor looked up, confused. Why? We're not under attack. Maintenance inspection. Hin lied smoothly. New regulations. I need to test them all at the orbital platform. That's strange. I didn't hear about any new regulations. Well, you know how command is. They don't tell us anything until the last minute. Herein smiled her most innocent smile. Can I have the codes? Otherwise I'll get in trouble for not doing the inspection. Her supervisor shrugged and gave her the codes. 2 hours later, Hyron was loading every defense drone she could access onto civilian transport ships. The pilots asked questions. She told them she had authorization. It was technically true. She had authorization to inspect the drones. She just didn't have authorization to send them into unknown space. But she knew how to live with that. Back on Prime, things had gotten worse. Salmuth was being forced into a slave cage with hundreds of other. The Kranith soldiers pushed them with electric prods. Anyone who moved too slowly was shocked until they fell. Keep moving, insects, growled a Kranith soldier. He was huge, covered in thick armor and scales. Your new life begins today. You'll work in the factories until you die. Be grateful we're letting you live at all. Zalmoth helped an elderly woman who had fallen. It's okay, he whispered to her. Stay strong. But he didn't feel strong. He felt broken. The beacon had failed. No help was coming. This was the end of his people's freedom. Above the planet, War Master Throcknall stood on the bridge of his flagship. He was pleased. The conquest of Elo Prime had taken only 3 days. Soon, the Kranith Dominion would have thousands of new slaves. His superiors would reward him well. Sir, said one of his officers, we've secured all major population centers. The remaining Velroy are being processed. Excellent. Begin loading them onto the transport ships. I want to be gone from this world by tomorrow. Throcknall looked at the planet below. Another victory for the Dominion. Another species learned their place in the galaxy. The strong ruled, the weak served. This was the natural order of things. His sensor officer suddenly spoke up. Sir, I'm detecting something strange. What? Long-range sensors are picking up ships. Lots of ships coming toward our position. Throcknall frowned. How many? The officer checked his screen. His eyes widened. Over 100, sir, and more appearing every hour. They're coming from the same direction, but they're not in any organized formation. Some are military vessels, some appear to be civilian. What species? Unknown, sir. We've never seen these ship designs before. Thrunal felt a cold worry in his chest, but he pushed it away. He commanded 300 warships. Whatever was coming couldn't possibly challenge the might of the Kranath Dominion. How long until they arrive? 4 days at their current speed. Then we have time. Continue loading the slaves. We'll be gone before they arrive, but keep the fleet in defensive formation just in case. 4 days away, Captain Dewan Kim stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit. His ship was no longer alone. Over the past 2 weeks, other vessels had joined him. First came Admiral Park's battle group, then the civilian ships, then more military vessels from other human fleets. Their commanders also willing to face court-martial to answer the call. Bora showed him the latest count. Sir, we now have over 200 ships in the formation. More are still arriving. Day 1 looked at the tactical display. It was the strangest fleet he'd ever seen. Proper warships flew alongside cargo haulers. Science vessels traveled next to mining barges. There was even that luxury yacht whose owner had somehow convinced a dozen other rich people to join him. They came, Duan said quietly. I sent the message and they came. Of course they came, said Taeyang, his first officer. The man had stopped questioning Daewon's decisions after Admiral Park arrived. You use the code. All hands, all ships. Humans don't ignore that code. Admiral Park's face appeared on the communication screen. Captain Kim, we'll reach the alien world in 4 days. What's your plan? Honestly, Admiral, I was hoping you'd have a plan. Park smiled. Me too. But here's what I know. We're facing an enemy we don't understand, using tactics we've never seen to save people we've never met. So, we do what humans do best. We adapt, we improvise, and we don't give up. Day 1 felt something warm in his chest. Hope, maybe, or just relief that he wasn't alone anymore. There's one more thing, Park said. I've been analyzing the data from that distress call. Bora, your communications officer, did excellent work cleaning it up. The attacking force appears to use a rigid military formation. Very organized, very predictable. That might be their weakness. How do we use that? Day 1 asked. We hit them with chaos. Make them think we're disorganized. Make them chase us. Then spring the trap. It's risky, but it might work. Day 1 looked at his crew. They were scared. So was he. But they'd come this far. Let's do it, he said. The human armada arrived at Velrose Prime in the early morning hours. On the surface, Zelmoth was sleeping in his cage when alarms began blaring. Kranath soldiers ran in every direction, shouting orders. What's happening? Asked the Velroy woman next to him. I don't know, Salmoth replied. But deep in his heart, something stirred. Hope. In orbit, Warm Master Thrakenol stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The unknown ships had arrived, and there were more than his scouts had reported. Over 200 vessels, all different sizes and types, spreading out in what looked like complete chaos. They have no formation, said his tactical officer. No discipline. They're just scattered. Thrognall studied the display. Some of the ships looked military, but many were clearly civilian vessels. What kind of species sent cargo ships to a battle? They're fools, Thrognall said. They've made this easy for us. Order the fleet to engage. Destroy them all. Theranith warships moved forward in perfect formation. 300 vessels, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. They had crushed 17 species with this fleet. These unknown aliens would be number 18. On the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, Captain Daewon watched the Kranath advance. Admiral Park, they're taking the bait. Admiral Park's voice came through the communication system. Good. All civilian ships, begin your retreat. Make it look panicked. Military vessels, hold your position and draw their fire. The human civilian ships turned and ran. Some fired their weak weapons as they fled to the Kranath. It looked like a rout. The enemy was breaking apart. They're running. Throcknow laughed. I was right. They're cowards. Pursue them. Don't let any escape. The Kranath fleet broke formation to chase the fleeing civilian ships. This was their first mistake. Captain Sangho Choi grinned as his cargo ship, the Steady Hand, ran from 3 Kranath cruisers. Come on, he muttered. Just a little closer. His ship's computer beeped. Enemy vessels in optimal range now. Sango hit the release button. Behind his ship, dozens of modified mining explosives tumbled out. disguised as debris and cargo containers. The Kranith ships, moving too fast to stop, flew right into them. The explosives detonated. Not enough to destroy the cruisers, but enough to damage their shields and engines. One cruiser spun out of control, crashing into another Kranith ship. "Ah!" Sang-Ho shouted. "That's for trying to enslave people." All across the battlefield, other civilian captains were executing similar tactics. The luxury yacht captain, Taiyang Yun, had done something even crazier. He'd evacuated all his passengers onto other ships. Then, he aimed his yacht directly at a Kranith command ship's engine core. "This is the most expensive missile in human history," Taiyang said calmly as his yacht accelerated, "but totally worth it." The yacht slammed into the Kranith ship at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a small sun. Meanwhile, Admiral Park's military vessels were executing their own plan. Her science officer, Bora Nam, had been analyzing the Kranith shield technology. She discovered something interesting. "Admiral, their shields oscillate at a fixed frequency. If we can match our weapons to that frequency, we can punch right through. Can you calculate the frequency?" "Already done. Sending it to all ships now." Within minutes, every human military vessel had adjusted their weapons. The next volley of fire tore through Kranith shields like they weren't there. Kranith ships began exploding. Warm Master Throcknell couldn't believe what he was seeing. His perfect fleet was being torn apart by chaos. These aliens fought with no discipline, no order. They improvised constantly. Every time he thought he understood their tactics, they did something different. "All ships reform defensive positions," he ordered. But his fleet was too scattered now, chasing individual civilian vessels across the battlefield. And those civilian vessels had led them into a trap. Iran Lee's defense drones activated. Hundreds of small, fast machines swarmed out from the modified transport ships where they'd been hidden. The drones moved like a school of fish, overwhelming Kranith point defense systems. They attached to ship holes and began cutting through armor. "What are those things?" Thrognall shouted. "Unknown technology, sir. They're too small and too many. We can't target them all." Captain Dewan coordinated the assault from his position. His science vessel's advanced sensors allowed him to see the entire battlefield. He directed ships where they were needed most. "Sang-Ho, 3 Kranith fighters approaching your position from above." "Got it." "Thanks." Sang-Ho's ship rolled and fired, catching the fighters by surprise. "Admiral Park, the Kranith flagship shields are weakening. The drones did their job." "Excellent. All military vessels concentrate fire on that flagship." The human warships focused their attack. Beam weapons and missiles converged on Throcknell's ship. The shields flickered and failed. The hull began to crack. "Sir, we must retreat," Throcknell's tactical officer shouted. "No, we are Kranth. We do not retreat from inferior species." But the decision was made for him. His ship shuddered as a human missile struck the bridge section. Emergency lights flickered. Systems failed around him. His fleet was being destroyed. The Kranith had never faced an enemy like this. They were trained to fight disciplined military forces. They knew how to counter standard tactics, but the humans didn't use standard tactics. They used whatever worked. They adapted in real time. They turned civilian ships into weapons. And most terrifying of all, they fought with something the Kranith didn't understand. Determination born from compassion. These humans weren't fighting for conquest or resources. They were fighting to save strangers they'd never met. Admiral Park broadcast a message on all Kranith frequencies. Her voice was calm, but firm. "This is Admiral Gia Park of the Terran Defense Fleet. You came here to take slaves. You found humans instead. We don't tolerate slavers. Retreat now, or we will destroy every ship in your fleet." Though wanted to refuse, wanted to fight to the death, but he looked at his tactical display. He'd started with 300 ships. Now less than half remained functional. The humans had lost only 17 vessels. The mathematics were clear. If he stayed, he would die. His entire fleet would die, and the Crowneth Dominion would learn nothing about these new enemies. "All ships," Thrunall said, his voice bitter. "Retreat full speed." The remaining Kranith vessels turned and fled. The humans let them go. They could have pursued, could have destroyed more, but they didn't. They'd won. That was enough. On the surface of Velro Prime, the Kranith soldiers suddenly received orders to evacuate. They ran for their transport ships, abandoning their prisoners. The cages opened. Velroy people stumbled out, confused and afraid. Salmoth emerged into the daylight. Above him in the sky, he could see the flashes of distant explosions. The battle was ending. The Kranith were leaving. Someone came, he whispered. Someone actually came. A small ship descended from orbit. It was white and blue, marked with symbols Zelmoth didn't recognize. The ship landed near the cages. A hatch opened. A human stepped out. Captain Dae Kim looked around at the devastation. Hundreds of frightened alien faces stared at him. He'd never seen beings like them before. They looked like giant insects, but their eyes held intelligence and emotion. One of them approached slowly. He was old, his shell marked with age. He looked at Dewan with something like wonder. You heard the beacon?" Zelmoth asked in his own language. Dewan's translator converted the words. "We heard someone needed help," he replied. "We came, but why?" "We are strangers to you." Dewan thought about that question. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. He thought about all the parents on this world who just wanted their children to be safe. He thought about the simple truth that had driven him across the galaxy. Because that's what we do. Day one said, "Someone calls for help and we answer. It doesn't matter if we know you or not." Zelmoth felt something break inside him. Not sadness, but relief. For 3 days he'd thought his people were doomed. He'd thought no one in the galaxy cared about them. He'd been wrong. "Thank you," Zelmoth said. "Thank you for coming." Around them, more human ships were landing. Medics emerged, offering help. Engineers began assessing damage. Soldiers moved through the area, checking for any remaining Kranith troops. And above it all, Admiral Park's fleet maintained orbit, standing guard. They would stay as long as needed, because that's what humans did. The Battle of Velrose Prime was over. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. They had defeated a major powers fleet to save people they'd never met. The galaxy would never forget it. President Hana Shin stood before the United Terran Council and felt like the floor was crumbling beneath her feet. The council chamber was in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded Admiral Park's arrest. Others called her a hero. No one could agree on anything. "Order." Hana slammed her hand on the podium. "I said order." The room gradually quieted. Hana looked at the faces around her. Fear, anger, confusion. She understood. 3 months ago, humanity thought it was alone in the universe. Now they knew about a galaxy full of alien empires, and they just made enemies of one of the most powerful. "We need to make a decision," Hana said. "Captain Kim has delivered his report. Admiral Park has sent daily updates. The situation is clear. We've involved ourselves in galactic politics. The question is, what do we do now?" Ambassador Yunong stood up. She was Earth's chief diplomat and one of Hana's closest advisors. "With respect, Madam President, I think the answer is obvious. We apologize to the Kranith Dominion. We claim Admiral Park acted without authorization. We distance ourselves from these events and hope the major powers leave us alone." "You want us to abandon the Velroy?" someone shouted. "I want us to survive," Yuna replied calmly. "We're one species, one planet. We have no allies out there. If the Kranith come for us in force, we can't win. If we apologize now, maybe we can avoid war." "That's cowardice," said another representative. "We saved those people. Now you want to pretend it didn't happen. I want to keep 7 billion humans alive." Hana let them argue. She understood both sides. The cautious approach made sense strategically, but morally, it felt wrong. She thought about the videos Captain Dewan had brought back. Belrothi children playing again. Families reunited. An entire species saved from slavery. Could she really say that was a mistake? Ambassador Kang Hana said, "What if we can't hide? Captain Kim's report says the Kranith are already searching for us. Apologizing won't make them forget we defeated their fleet." Yuna frowned. "Then we need to prepare for war, mobilize the entire defense fleet, build more ships, fortify Earth. That could take years. Then we don't have much time." Lieutenant Wu Jin, who had returned to Earth with Captain Dewan, stepped forward. "Madam President, if I may, there might be a third option." "Speak." "The Velroy have offered to introduce us to the Neutral Assembly. It's a coalition of minor species that maintain independence by staying neutral in conflicts between the major powers. If we can gain recognition there, we might avoid immediate war." "Why would they recognize us?" someone asked. "We just attacked a major power." "Because we also defeated that major power," Wu Jin said. "The Neutral Assembly respects strength. But more importantly, several species in the Assembly are former slaves who escaped from the Kranith. They might welcome allies who oppose slavery. Hana considered this. How long would it take to arrange a meeting? Ambassador Kang would need to travel to their assembly station. Perhaps 3 weeks. Do it. Ambassador, I'm sending you to meet with this neutral assembly. In the meantime, I'm authorizing Admiral Park to continue her operations. We're not apologizing. We're not running. We're standing by our actions. The council erupted in arguments again, but Hana had made her decision. Now she just hoped it was the right one. Far across the galaxy in the heart of Kranith space, Warm Master Throcknall knelt before the Supreme War Council. The chamber was dark and cold. 5 ancient Kranith leaders sat in judgment. They had ruled the Dominion for centuries. They did not tolerate failure. Speak, commanded the High Commander. Explain how you lost 60% of your fleet to an unknown species. Throcknall kept his eyes down. The humans fought unlike any species we've encountered. They had no discipline, no formation. They adapted constantly. Their tactics were unpredictable. So, you're saying they were better warriors than the Kranith? No, Commander. I'm saying they were different. They fought with passion, as if saving those slaves meant everything to them. I've never seen such determination. Weakness, spat another council member, caring about lesser beings. This is why they'll fail. But the High Commander raised a hand. Tell me, Warm Master, if these humans care so much about slaves, what will they do when word spreads? When other species begin calling for their help? Throcknall understood. They'll respond. They'll interfere with our operations across the sector. Exactly. We cannot allow this. If other species believe they can be rescued, our entire system of control collapses. We must make an example of these humans. We must show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. The High Commander stood. I am assigning Void Reaver Krathos to this task. He will take our finest fleet and find the human homeworld. He will destroy it utterly. And when he broadcasts images of Earth burning, every species in the galaxy will remember. The Kranith Dominion is not to be challenged. On Velrose Prime, Admiral Park received the intelligence with cold dread. Her scouts had intercepted Kranith communications. A hunter fleet was being assembled. Its only mission, find Earth and destroy it. How long do we have? She asked Wu Jin, who had sent the report from Earth. Krathos is the best tracker in the Dominion. He'll interrogate species along the frontier, follow ship trails, analyze trade routes. Our analysts estimate he'll find Earth in 2 to 3 months. 2 months. Park looked at her tactical display. Her 12 warships couldn't stop a hunter fleet. Earth's defense forces weren't ready for an attack of this magnitude, but maybe they didn't have to face it alone. Over the past weeks, Park had been making contact with other species. The Velroy trade networks had opened doors. Species that suffered Underanth rule were curious about the humans. Some were cautiously interested in alliance. Get me a secure channel to all our contacts, Park ordered. It's time to test this alliance idea. On the colony world of Nujuing near Hinli, worked 18-hour days. She was back home now, officially in trouble for stealing military equipment. But instead of arresting her, the government had promoted her. They needed people who could think creatively. We need more ships, she told her team. The military is building as fast as they can, but it's not enough. We need to retrofit civilian vessels, make them combat capable. That'll take months, someone said. Then we'd better start now. Cargo Captain Sungho Choi volunteered his ship for the retrofit program. The steady hand had survived the battle, though barely. Make my ship a proper weapon, he told the engineers. If the Ranth come for Earth, I'm going to be ready. All across human space, similar preparations were happening. Colonies contributed resources. Civilian captains volunteered for military training. Scientists worked on new weapons and defenses. But everyone knew it might not be enough. Captain Dewan spent his time training new crews on the indomitable Spirit. The ship had been repaired and upgraded. It wasn't just a science vessel anymore. It was the ship that had answered the call. The ship that started everything. Do you regret it? Bora asked him one day, answering that distress signal. Day One thought about it. Because of his decision, Earth was now in danger. Because of his decision, they might face a war they couldn't win. No, he said finally. We did the right thing. If we ignored that call because we were afraid, we'd be no better than the empires out there. Fear can't be the reason we turn away from people who need help, even if it costs us everything, even then. Because what's the point of surviving if we lose who we are in the process? Ambassador Yunong stood before the neutral assembly 3 weeks later. The assembly station was enormous, housing representatives from over 100 species. Most were small powers too weak to resist the major empires alone. Together, they maintained a fragile independence. "I speak for humanity," Una said, her words translated into dozens of languages. "We are new to this galaxy. We did not seek conflict. But when we heard a cry for help, we could not ignore it. We saved the Velroy from slavery. We defeated a Kranath war fleet. And now the Kranth hunt us in revenge. Why should we care?" asked a reptilian ambassador. "Your actions were reckless. You've angered one of the major powers for strangers. This is foolishness, is it?" Una replied. "How many species here were threatened by the Kranath? How many lost family members to their slave raids? How many wanted someone to stand up to them but were too afraid?" The chamber went quiet. She'd struck a nerve. "We didn't fight the Kranath for territory." Unot continued. "We fought them because slavery is wrong, because innocent people were dying, because someone had to say no more. If that's foolishness, then I'm proud to be a fool." An insectoid representative stood up. Her species had escaped Kranath slavery 50 years ago. "The humans did what we wished we could do. They stood up to bullies. They paid a price for it. My vote is to welcome them to the assembly." "Mine too," said another. "And mine." The vote wasn't unanimous. Many species were too afraid to associate with humanity. But enough voted yes. Humanity was now part of the neutral assembly. It wasn't much, but it was recognition, legitimacy, a small shield against the coming storm. Una sent the news back to Earth. President Hana read it with relief. They had allies now. Not many, but some. But even as she celebrated this small victory, the reports came in. Krathos's hunter fleet was moving through the frontier, getting closer, interrogating species, following trails.